If you have space between studs in an unfinished wall in your garage or in your basement, let me show you how you can install a work surface that you can flip up when you need it. It's good and solid. When you don't need it, simply release. It goes back in between those studs in that cavity and hides away. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use these folding brackets that I got from Amazon. I'll leave a link down in the description below. But what this is going to do is it's going to be mounted to a piece of wood here, and then when it flips out, it locks into place, and now I'm going to be able to have my work surface. And then when I don't need it, I just collapse it, and it goes out of the way. And because it's in between the two studs, it will collapse down into that cavity and still give me all the walking space that we have right now. Now, one of the challenges is how do I mount them? Now, this looks like it's OSB probably, it's the outside sheathing, but I don't want to take any risks. Now, if you're doing this in an unfinished area of your basement, for example, this is going to be drywall. You certainly don't want to screw anything into that. It won't hold, and it'll stick through on the other side where, you know, it's a livable area. So how do I mount this with these 3 screws that I need to mount it with? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of 3/4 inch plywood in between these 2 studs, flat here, and I'm going to use pocket holes to screw it into each of the studs. That gives me something I can safely screw into and not have to worry about damaging whatever's behind this. Now, I want my work surface to be about 30 inches from the floor, so I'll measure up from my floor here about 30 inches. So that'll be about here, and then I'll measure what the gap is at that point. Now, you might think you could measure the gap anywhere, but you can't, because the gap's not going to be consistent. This stud, for example, is quite warped, as is that one. That was even worse over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure what my gap is here so that I can get the correct measurement. So I'm looking at it here. It's about 15 1/8. Now, we do want it to be tight. We want it to be snug to each of the studs. We don't want there to be gaps so that it holds in nice and tight with those pocket holes. So I've marked my line at 15 1/8 from the edge of the board, and I'm holding the board down onto my work surface using my trigger clamps through the bench dog holes. I'll link to the video where I show you how to do that for your work surface up in the top corner. So now I'm going to cut my plywood to the length that I need it. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we need to dry fit it in that cavity to make sure that this is the correct distance, and if it's too big, we can just shave a little off. So I'm going to start by marking from the floor up just a little more than 30 inches so that I have the board. I know where I need to dry fit this board. Now I can grab my board, and I don't want to push it all the way in because I need to be able to get it out. But it's a little too tight there, so it's always better to be able to shave off as opposed to making it too small. So I'll go back and shave a little off of this side, and hopefully that'll get us to fit. And wow, that bowing of that stud is really causing an issue here. So I'll keep shaving until I know it's going to fit. And finally it fits. It's nice and snug where I need it to be. So now I can go ahead and put the pocket holes in. Now when you're putting pocket holes into material that this is 3/4 inch thick, but the stud is 1.5 inch thick, how do you set the depth? Well, you always go to what you're drilling into. So the holes are going to be in this piece of wood here. So this is the 3/4 inch plywood. So I'll set my crank jig to the 3/4 inch setting here. Okay, set to 3/4 inch. And now with my collar here, set it to 3/4 of an inch. See, it's been set to 3/4 of an inch here. Lock that in. Now I can go ahead and set up and drill the holes, the pocket holes in, and I'm probably going to put maybe 3 or 4 in each side, because I think that I want some really good hold into those studs. Okay, so I've got all my pocket holes drilled on each side here. Now I can go ahead and screw it into the studs on each side of the cavity. Okay, so I've got my mark at about 31, so I'm going to get the board in about there. Okay, and I can put my preload a couple of screws here on my each side. Now I like to use not a driver, but just a regular, this is a power screwdriver, not even a drill, so that I don't blast through the side of the material. You see, it still holds it very tight. I'm going to do one on the other side, pull it tight there too. Okay, so you have to be careful, especially here, because it's, notice it's pinching down here, but there's a bit of a gap up here. So I'm going to put it in on all 4 corners so it's nice and tight on the wall. Okay, that's really tight, and I'm not sure I needed all 5 holes. I think 3 is going to be plenty enough, given how strong this is feeling right now. I need one more screw. It's amazing how well these pocket holes will hold. So now that's a very, very strong hold. Now what I can do is go ahead and mount the brackets. I want to next mount the brackets. By the way, I used 1 1/4 inch screws, which is the recommended for 3/4 inch plywood. So I'm going to mark my 30 inches. Actually, I'm going to go 30 1/4 here. And I'm going to make a level line so that I can make sure I have my brackets in the right spot. Check. There we go. Now you could also, if you wanted, you could use a laser for this as well, laser level. I just decided to go old school on this one. Okay, so now I have my line where I'm going to mount the top of my brackets to. Okay, so the wonders of technology. The first one I attached, got in, and the camera didn't record it. So good thing I've got a second one to do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the top of the bracket with the top, with the line here that I've drawn. That's why I drew the level line. Get my screw ready to do the top hole. And again, I want to make sure that the bracket goes inside of where the pocket holes are. So I can put it here and make sure that it is there. Get my screw loaded onto my screwdriver here. And okay, now I want to make sure that this is level here as best we can. Okay, put the bottom one in. our middle one. So I'm using 3/4 inch or 1 inch screws. Now I know I have OSB here, so I actually used 1 inch screws. I didn't have any 3/4 today. But if you have drywall here, you definitely don't want to use a 1 inch screw. You want to use a 3/4 inch screw, because otherwise it's going to go actually into that drywall and possibly through. So now that I have my brackets on, I can put my work surface on. Now I'm going to use a 1/2 inch piece of plywood, and these are 16-inch deep brackets. So I'm going to bring this out almost 24 inches, I think close to 24 inches, I think I can bring that out. And I'm going to cut that plywood, and then I'm going to bring it back and I'll attach it. It already has holes. They give you little screws that are about 5/8 of an inch, which should be fine for 1/2 inch plywood. So I'll go ahead, cut that plywood, and then we'll come and put it on. So when I'm measuring how wide I want the board to be, I want to make sure it's going to clear the studs here and down below. Now, if the studs are warped a bit, like these are warped as we know, we want to make sure that we're going to clear it. So I'm going to measure the inside here, and this is it's almost 14 3/4. So I'm going to go at 14 1/2. I don't want to go anything wider than that to give myself a little bit of clearance on each side. So I'm going to have a 14 1/2 wide, 24 inches deep piece of 1/2 inch plywood as my work surface. So I'll go measure the plywood and cut it. So I have a straight edge set up to guide the saw to make this a really nice straight cut here. So we'll go ahead and cut on our straight edge. Okay, so now we have our 24 inches by 14 and a bit, 14 1/2. So now we can go test fit it on the brackets. So we've got our piece of plywood, we've got our brackets, and it fits, it slides, fits in there. Now let's release these, flip it down as if it were attached, and okay, so we've run into a bit of a challenge here. It is sticking out a bit because the concrete in our garage comes up a little ways. So I have two options. One is leave it this way, if that's the height that I really want it to be. Or if I want it to completely go into the cavity, then I just need to move everything up about 5 inches or so to give me the space so that the 1/2 inch plywood slides right in between the two studs of the cavity. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up because it is really a tight walking area right here. So I'll take and this is one of the advantages of using pocket holes, is we can take them off, move it up, and then reattach it. And so this is one of the things, and I wanted to show you this because it depends on kind of how your structure is set, whether you're going to hit something at the bottom or not, or whether you need to move it up, or whether it's going to clear down below. The other thing I did with the plywood is I sanded all of the edges and the top while I was moving that, and so it fits nicely in our brackets. Flip it down, and it tucks in to our cavity. So now I can go ahead and screw this on. The brackets come with some screws to do this. They're about 5/8 of an inch long, which will work for the 1/2 inch plywood because there's the bracket thickness is a little bit there. So I've got these little screws here. Preset holes. Okay, do one on the other side, and then we'll make sure it's lined up, that I didn't get anything out of alignment here. Feel that one a little bit up there. So you do have to be a bit careful. So let's test this. Okay, so it's off of alignment a bit. It's a little angled this way because it's binding on this edge here. So after a little fiddling around, I got one screw on the front of each and it goes in. Does take a little fiddling, but now we can put the other screws in. 2 more on each side. So all the screws are now in. I would recommend using 1/2-inch screws, not the 5/8. These, a couple of them are poking up a bit, which I might have to deal with, but now I have a work surface. It folds down, tucks in between those 2 studs in that cavity, totally out of the way when I want to use it. Just pick it up, and now it's a good solid work surface. I can put tools on there, I can assemble a project if I need to, whatever. It's a great way to make use of the space in between the studs, the cavity, and be able to fold it away quickly and easily. I'll put links to the brackets, the Craig jig, and all the other tools or resources that I used in the description below. If you found this video helpful, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you get notified when I publish new videos. If the information in this video was helpful to you, here are some other videos I think you'll also find helpful. Thanks for watching.